As the name suggests, United Advent Christian Church was formed by the merger of two churches, 4th Street Advent Christian Church and Wilmington Advent Christian Church. As part of the merger, the churches agreed that services would be held at the 4th Street Church building, while steps were taken to find a new location for the construction of a new church building. The church merger took effect on January 1st, 1970. A groundbreaking ceremony was held almost 3 years later on December 17, 1972, at the new property on College Road. After a lengthy construction process, United Advent Christian Church held a dedication service on Sunday, November 24, 1974. We will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of that service this year on Sunday, November 24th, 2024, exactly 50 years to the day. It's a real pleasure to have some people who were church members during the 1970s joining together today to have an informal discussion regarding the church's early years, the building process, and the dedication service, and we thank each of you for your willingness to be here today. We have 4 individuals who represent the people who were adults in the church at that time: Judy Davis, Nora Milliner, Mickey Rayner, and Alton Wood, who was also the chairman of the building committee. Representing the people who were youth group members at that time are Donna Russ Biggers, Charles Kraft, Linda Milliner Heath, and myself, Greg Wood. So thank y'all for being here. We're just going to talk a little bit about some things related to the 1970s in particular in the church, and anybody can go at any point in time that you'd like in response. To start things off, I'd like for you to discuss something about the planning process and the months leading up to the move to the College Road location. During that time, what was the general attitude or feeling among members of the newly formed United Advent Christian Church?
I remember my dad being chairman of the official board of what was then the 4th Street Church. And I believe, Alton, at that point in time, you were either chairman of the board or in a similar position. And we always called it the 9th Street Church, but the Women in Advent Christian Church. And I remember going to your house at Princess Place Drive at the time because Dad had to be there, and there was needed to do something with the kids. And you got a playroom, I think, or something over there that we'd hang out in. And y'all had meetings leading up to the merger. I remember the night the churches voted for the merger at the same time, sometime late 1969, and driving over to your church at that time and letting you know the vote had taken place at the 4th Street Church, and the excitement of finding out what the vote was at the Women in Advent Christian Church. And so the planning for the merger itself and then the planning for the building all run together some. Because I remember there was other properties considered. There was one on a street off of Oleander Drive, I believe it was called Inglewood Drive, that was considered at the time. Then somebody came up with the wild hair of moving out into the wilderness, out on South College Road, where there was nothing at the time. And then that after getting into that process, finding out the ground was too soft to support the structure. And Alton, I don't know how many pilings y'all had to decide to build at the time, or place in the ground at the time to support the structure. And of course, that represented a real crisis at the moment. The budget had been planned. I believe church bonds had been sold. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how much more that cost at the time, but that was a real tough moment.
Roger Price was headed it up to start with. The place on Inglewood Drive, we went out and cleared the property and had planned to build before the idea of the merger came about. But I'm going to mention just a few things that happened at the beginning here. When we bought the property, we had a building committee, and we met to turn the first shovel of dirt over, and it was a windy, cold day, and we had to take ground samples before we could build, and we were ready to go, and we took samples, and it turned out to be castle hanging clay base for it. And that meant that we had to put pilings down before we could ever start. And I'll let somebody else talk for a while now, but I'll get back to that in a few minutes.
Does anybody else have remembrances of just what things were like when people were thinking about, oh, we're going to build a new church and where we're going to build it?
You want the microphone?
Like has been mentioned, we were teenagers. And I can remember being at 4th Street and the young people from Wilmington Advent Christian Church coming over, where we kind of made our own committee and to merge the two youth groups. And we elected new officers, some from the Wilmington church, some from our church. And we got a new place to meet. We moved out of a Sunday school room into the basement, which became our spot. Yeah. But all of that was, I remember it as a very positive time. It's certainly for the teenagers it was, because we just seemed to kind of been together all our lives almost. And it was rapid. It wasn't like us and them. It was us. And it didn't matter that we chose the 4th Street location to meet in. It didn't matter that we came from two different churches. What mattered was that we were all there together. And I remember the youth in particular just being happy that we were there. It was never a question about what would be best for the kids who came from 4th Street and what would be best for the kids that came from Wilmington. It was what would be best for the group. And our leaders, and I don't really remember who they were at the time, but they were very careful, I think, to instill that in us. It's not about us, or it's not about them. It's about the group as a whole together.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that I know from the youth group perspective, I 100% agree. And I think that was probably true with the adults, overall, who were setting the stage and leading us in how we should accept things. Well, moving along, what do you remember about two things related to the building? One, there had to be some fundraising. So there were different things for fundraising. And then second, what do you remember specifically about the construction processes, the hits, the misses, and the people involved?
I can
You
tell
may want
you a
the
lot
mic.
about that, but somebody else needs to talk. I remember at the groundbreaking, as I mentioned, we found out we had bad soil. It resulted in her having to hold up on the program, and we had to put in 100. I believe it was 100 pilings. That necessitated a lot of extra money in the building program, and I recall that we decided rather than extend the loan that we had, that we would try to raise the funds from the church. And Liza Crouch and myself made certificates of deposit and sold to members of the church to raise an additional $25,000. And that's how we got going. We paid 1% more than the banks and the savings and loans paid, and didn't have a problem at all in getting the funds, and that put us on the right track for construction.
Anybody else familiar, remember anything specific to fundraising part of things?
Spaghetti suppers and the old Fellowship Hall, Memorial Hall, we called it back then, over on the 4th Street location.
We did car washes too,
Car washes?
because I remember at one of those car washes, a bumblebee got up somebody's pants leg. And right out in that parking lot, that person was coming out of those pants. But we had right many of those that, and like Charles was saying, the spaghetti suppers were always a success too.
Did anybody come by, move into the construction process? Did anybody come by and sneak in and walk around and see how things were going during the process like you usually do when you're building your home? I know we did.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after we began our construction, we entered the monsoon season, and construction was delayed for about 3 months. It rained every day. All the contractors we had left. We had nobody here for approximately 3 months. And I recall very distinctly Silas Aldridge and myself went into what is now the ladies' restroom, and we both knelt in prayer. And I've never heard a more effective prayer than Silas Aldridge made. And amazingly, the weather cleared, and we were fortunate in that we got our contractors back and got them started to work.
Yeah, and during that time, there were a number of different committees that were all part of making this happen, from fundraising to building committee, and I think there were probably 3 or 4. Each committee probably had 3 to 5 different members. So it was very much a cooperative and group effort as opposed to just 1 or 2 people doing all the work.
I remember the primary contractor was Harnett Construction Company, Carl Calder, and I think that's how Carl got to know this church, and of course he and Betsy became longtime members. And I don't know whether it was Alton's idea or Carl's idea, but a sign was placed on the site at the time reminding the construction workers, you're involved, and I don't know the exact words, but you're involved in the building of a house of worship, so be mindful of your conduct while you're here. And who knows what happened to that sign, but.
It had a big effect.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having an argument with Carl. We were great friends, but I remember having an argument with him about something about the brick. And I said, Carl, you better watch what you're doing here, because someday you and Betsy are going to walk down the aisle of this church and become members. And sure enough, they did.
During that process, everybody here was involved in different ways, shapes, and forms. Do you recall anything specific about the role that you played or that anybody in your family played in preparing for the move from 4th Street Church building to this church building?
Well, I remember that my dad was one of the ones that was captured in the picture where people were digging a hole,
Breaking ground.
breaking the ground, yeah, for that. Who else was doing that?
There was a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But I know I represented the youth, and one of the Smith brothers, wasn't it, that Harry Smith represented the adults.
Yeah.
And it was cold and windy.
And Julian Rayner.
Yeah.
And we had a youth pastor at the time Ronnie Fordham, does that name come back? That's captured in one of those pictures.
But it was a large gathering of people that were outside for the groundbreaking part of it. And I know probably some in here may have helped box up hymnals and, box up various things. Some of you were possibly youth group leaders that helped to organize us in the youth group to help to do different things as well. So moving to November 24th, 1974, the date of the first service here and the date of the dedication service. What did it feel like to be a part of that? If you remember, I know some of us are having a hard time remembering 50 years ago exactly what things were, but even if you don't remember exactly, do you remember kind of a concept of how you felt about things that were happening and your roles as how they would transition over from the 4th Street building to the new building?
Well, even further back than that, Greg, I can remember one of the pastors giving us a pep talk over at 9th Street, telling us that we could join the merger and sit on the back pew and just be a member if we wanted to, or we could jump in and be a part. And I can remember thinking, I'm going to jump in and be a part. So it became very exciting to me. And the general feeling, I think, was excitement. And of course, there's always something that nags you a little bit about being a little bit afraid too. Something new, change, and we all don't do change real well. But it was an exciting time because we had been so small over on 9th Street, and we were a close-knit group too. And so it was, I was a little awestruck by it, even just moving over to 4th Street, because that place was bigger than what we had. And so then when we had this brand new place to come to, it didn't feel like theirs or ours anymore. It was all of us together.
Yeah, and I know, Judy, you at the time were the choir director and the church organist, and I know we had an organ at the 4th Street location, but you came here and the organ was much, much different. Was it worrisome to try to come to the new one, or was it an easy transition?
No, I just think I was so excited about, having a new experience that it didn't, seem to bother me. And I remember one thing, when we built this, at this particular place, kept saying Collins Road is the middle of New Hanover County. And we can come from north, south, east, and west. We'll be right in the middle. So that's changed a lot.
A lot, because there was nothing out here at that time, as I recall, except for us. Yeah. So, yeah.
With the monkeys.
Yeah, and Monkey Junction was small at that time. I know from a youth group perspective, as I recall, we loved that basement over at 4th Street. That was our spot and everything. So I think there was some curiosity about, are we going to have a spot here? But by the same token, I think there was a lot of excitement about how much more we could do, how much more room we had to do things, to use the fellowship hall. And if you remember at that time, fellowship hall was smaller than it is now, but it also had a stage. And we could do productions and different things on the stage. And I think sometimes we would hang out on the stage because it was reminiscent of maybe the basement area over at the 4th Street location.
Don't forget the balcony at 4th Street.
Oh, yeah.
Fond memories as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't have the balcony here.
Yeah, that balcony could be a problem sometimes. Because I can remember when Terry was a young teen, one Sunday, right in the middle of the service, our pastor called her name out. And of course, Eddie Rayner was horrified. He just could not wait to get hold of her after church to find out what she had been doing. So he went to the pastor and asked him, and he said, I just wanted their attention. He said they were chattering up there, and Eddie said, but what, you called her name? He said, because I knew I could. But he didn't have to ever again.
He did that a few times when the teenagers were talking or whatever. He'd call them by name and
Including his son, as I recall.
yes, and we would quickly get quiet and stop chattering and so forth. But I liked the balcony, but I never went up there. I may have walked up the steps, but somebody told me that it was in danger of collapsing.
I have
So-
I have a story about
You didn't
the
want to collapse
balcony.
with it, did you?
Yeah.
The youth group was conducting a service, all the entire services at 4th Street. And Dickie Miller was Reverend Friendly was his name. And the youth group was the choir and everything else about that service. And speaking of the balcony, Ron Aldridge was up in the balcony with the trumpet. And in some point in the service, Ron blew on that trumpet, and I've forgotten her name now, but
Mrs.
she
Hall.
jumped up. Who?
May
Mrs.
Lily
Hall.
Hall.
May Lily Hall jumped up out of her chair and said, "The Lord is coming, the Lord is coming," and she headed for the door. and while I'm on the mic, one more thing about the building. Due to the delay, the 3 months delay, when we finished the building, the church, proving that it indeed was a church because prices had risen during that time, paid each contractor 10% above his contract price. And that was, of course, well received.
There you go. So, considering the move from 4th Street to this location, were there things that you recall that we took from 4th Street as things to honor the history of that location? And was there anything at 4th Street, other than for the youth group, the basement, that was hard to leave behind when we came?
Greg, one final thought on the day of the the day of the dedication itself.
I'm sorry.
The brothers in Christ were responsible for parking that
Yes.
day. And we ran out of places to put cars. And of course, the guys felt kind of important or because they were part of the process of getting people here. It was a very cold day, and the parking lot was full and trying to find places to park cars. And that was the young men's role that Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
The capacity of the church at that time was 335, I believe. And we had at least that many at the opening service because all the aisles were filled with chairs and some people were standing.
You want it?
Okay, going back now to what we brought over from 4th Street location, anybody recall anything particular to that?
Charles and I and Greg were sitting down there talking a few minutes ago, and I do believe that the original Bible that sits on our communion table came along with the communion table. I don't know, there is one thing that we did not bring that was located downstairs in the basement, which belonged to the youth group, and it was a toilet that had been painted bright blue, had a face drawn on the lid. Now, what purpose it served down there, I don't know. I just remember us painting it and decorating it. And I think probably the consensus among our leaders, if not, I don't think it was necessarily consensus among those of us who were members, was that that was an object better left there, as we did not move it with us.
That was a good decision in looking back.
I think it was.
I don't remember much about the planning because I was a mother of 2 teenagers,
and they kept me busy. And but I remember we were very excited about it, and the kids all from that were going to 4th Street came out here with us. And at that time, sometime if they came to your house, you would have 35 or 40. And I thought it was just wonderful. And it still is. A lot of them have grown up and still come to this church, which is smaller than it was, but it's a viable church. And I would recommend it to anybody that's looking for a church to come and try us and see how much you will be loved and accepted.
Thank you. So go ahead, Donna.
Well, one thing that we brought over, I believe we brought over was the large painting that my sister-in-law, Kyoko,
Yes.
Russ, had painted to put in the baptism. It was of the River Jordan, I believe. And we brought it over here, but it didn't fit the shape of our baptism, so we hung it up over here. I don't know where it is now. It's somewhere, hopefully in the church, but she painted that. She was very talented. My sister.
It was a beautiful painting.
Yeah. We can find it again.
I distinctly remember it being in the baptismal on 4th Street.
Me too.
So here we are 50 years later, thinking back over the years. Some of us have been here ever since all this happened. Some of us were here for a while and then transitioned to other places. Do you feel like this church building has been serving our community, serving our membership well? Do you think overall the planning worked well and the result has turned out well? How do you feel things have gone in relation to the building itself?
I think it absolutely meets all those things. It really has, and I can remember talking about Carl Calder when some refurbishing was going on in the sanctuary. Nancy and Johnny Young lived across the street, and Terry was tending to Emily and Valerie. And Terry decided to do a little cleaning in the den and moved a table, and a snake was coiled up under the little table. And the girls had a playroom upstairs, and Terry ushered them up there very quickly to try to decide what she was going to do about that snake. And then she brought them back down, put them in the car, and came over to the church because she knew Carl Calder was over here. What she didn't know was that Carl was terrified of snakes. Terrified. And she ran in the sanctuary, and he had his guys all up front doing the work. And he turned and she yelled his name. She said, "I need a man." And he just stood there and looked at her, and she said, "Quickly." Anyway, he came to the back to find out what was wrong, and she told him there was a snake in Nancy's den. And Carl Calder went with her to Nancy's house, got the snake out of the house, and Terry did not learn until after that was over that that man was terrified.
And rightfully so in my book.
He was terrified of snakes. And, but she won't ever forget that either.
He was a good man.
He was.
Very good.
He was.
From a youth group perspective, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think the building has done a great job of serving everything we needed, from the fun aspects of being part of the youth group to the serious aspects of what the church is intended for and does. The design has worked well. The only thing that I know of consequence or significance that has happened to the building since it was initially constructed was the expansion of the area of Fellowship Hall where we're sitting now, and some bathroom work. Oh, and the kitchen too, Donna has reminded me. Thank you.
And I think from a youth group perspective, there were many little nooks and crannies at 4th Street Church where we would play hide and seek or play sardines. And it was kind of exciting to get here and find out they had built in those nooks and crannies just for us. There are a lot of places in here that you can hide. And Renee and I, when we were the youth leaders, we spent lots of hours in here playing hide and seek with the kids. And do you know, just in case you're interested, you can go into these doors at the back of the fellowship hall where the ice machine is or where the health ministries closet was. You can crawl all the way through on your belly until you are looking out of the vents under the pulpit into the sanctuary. So, and you get an entirely different perspective. But I think the building still is serving its purpose. If you were to go up and look at the calendar for the month that is on the bulletin board up front, you will see that the building is open to the community. The Girl Scouts meet. Narcotics Anonymous group meets. A homeschool group meets. The soccer field has been used for youth soccer events where they meet and practice and play their games out back. There are people in and out of here. We have a violin teacher at the moment and a piano teacher who use this building because their students are out in this area and they are from the Brooklyn Arts Center, which is downtown. So the building gets a lot of use. It is serving the community. And so I think, like Greg, it has served its purpose well over the years, servicing our congregation and also servicing the area around us.
Thank you, Linda. So whoever did the planning and construction back then and did all the support to get things to here obviously had good forethought and did a great job of getting us to where we are now. Thinking back over the last 50 years, is there anything, any special event, any special occasions that occurred here in this building that really stand out to you, or when you think of them make you smile or warm your heart, that have either been recurring or one-time events?
The weddings of fellow members, the anniversary celebrations, even the going away parties like we had for Rick and Jennifer.
Remember the bicentennial event we had here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shrimperoos and barbecues.
Yes.
Say that again?
Shrimperoos and barbecues. They drew more people than we could put in here.
Yeah.
Yes, Judy.
I was married in this church.
Oh, were you?
And I was the one when my first husband died, I said I would never get married again because I had 2 daughters and I would never do anything that would cause any harm to them. And I had a ladies' prayer group that met at my house every Tuesday, and they said they were praying for me, a husband. I said, well, you can just skip over that prayer because I am not getting married again. Well, I did get married, and it was a very hard decision. I knew who Wilbur was, but I did not know that, we parted ways in high school. He went to the Air Force and I stayed here, went to college. And the ladies at the prayer, he called me one night and he started going here to church with his son, and he came with Estelle Edwards. That was his aunt. And he called me one Tuesday night and said, would you like to go out to supper Friday night and go to a movie? I said, let me check my calendar. And I said, after I hung out that phone, I said, what did I just do? I cannot believe I did that. I cannot believe I did that. And I was trying to think of ways to graciously get out of it, and I never did think of anything. I said, well, I can go one time, but I don't have to go again. Well, I got respectfully treated like a lady, and I went the next Friday night, and the next Friday night, and the next Friday night. And so when we're getting serious, we had a lot of insurers, and also we had a lot of Job's comforters who know better than you do what you need. And you don't ever marry anybody that's been divorced. That's trouble. Wilbur got a lot. Don't ever marry anybody that has children. If you get married again, don't marry somebody with children. So we prayed about it and was asking the Lord about it. And when he asked me to marry him, the reason that I did was he said, I want you to know up front that God does not have stepchildren, and I won't either. Your daughters will be my daughters. I said, yes, that is God from heaven speaking to me. I did it, and it's been a joyful, wonderful marriage.
We're happy for you.
How long have you been married now, Judy?
Huh?
How long have y'all been married?
44 years.
Wow.
Doesn't seem like that long.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Wow.
I have a lot of memories, like womanless weddings, bean suppers, hee-haw up on this stage, things like that. But the one memory that sticks with me the most is being able to come with my college friends and the Berkshire Choir to this church and singing my home, because we went lots of places. We sang in a lot of churches where students, that was their home church. But somehow or other, and maybe rightfully so or not so much, this was far more special to me. I mean, their home churches were good, but this was my home. And to stand up in that choir loft with Wes standing in front of us and my newly made college friends standing there with me, and to look out at a congregation that were not my friends, they were my family. And to stand there and sing, and then to hear the responses the next day as we got back on the bus of how well they had been treated in the homes where they had gone that night. That was not always the case. Not that people didn't want to, but often there were not funds in the places we sang for the families to really make a big deal out of us spending the night. We were just there. But that is, and we came twice while I was in college, and those are among my fondest memories, was sharing my family at United with my family at school.
Back before then, before we were starting to spread out and go to college, and we had a bunch of us here every Sunday. I can remember Sunday night after Sunday night going to the homes, people sitting around this table, and how you were treated like kids, not just kids, their kids, your kids. I mean, you were in a home, we always felt welcomed and appreciated and loved, and you would even have us back again, which meant we didn't do badly the last time. And progressive suppers where, after doing that all year long, people would host us near Christmas time, going house to house, and in between we'd go somewhere maybe and sing. Back then we used to call on remember the Greer sisters?
Yes, yeah.
That name comes back to mind. Just some great memories of being treated like we were one big family. Sunday night, probably Thursday night skating at Sunset Park roller rink. And a lot of that, Greg, as the church was getting ready to move, and as the church moved, that's when a lot of us were about to be college age or were college age. So the period I'm talking about really precedes that to some extent, but fond memories.
And some I have too was
The youth going caroling at Christmas. That was exciting, but what stands out really exciting to me was in my older years when I was caregiver for Jackie, my brother, to have these young people who were grown up adults now at my door at Christmas time singing. I won't ever forget that unless my memory leaves me. That
We'll
was
remind
so
you.
special to me.
Wonder how many bunny cakes you ladies made.
No, we did a lot. Even that was fundraising too. We did a lot.
Yes.
Did you have something you were going to say?
Mr. Wood?
Forgot what I was going
No. Well, to me, just to echo what everybody else has said, this has been a family. Whether you were an adult, whether you were a kid, And I know we're here and we'll be celebrating the building in November, but the building is the building, and the people are the actual church. And we've been blessed to have just an amazing amount of support as the youth when we were growing up and as the adults over here, and it has never felt anything but like a family. And so the last question on our list is there anything special you'd like for future guests and members here to know about United? And that would be my thing, and I'm sure probably would be echoed by several of you.
We want to continue to grow. We want young people to join, young couples, and want them to experience that feeling of family, that feeling of love and inclusion, just like we did.
And I think the folks who are here representing the adults of the church at that time they were largely responsible for setting the path and leading the way. And we've just been blessed to have them and to have each other, since January 1st, 1970.
Yeah. And one of the things that's changed over the years is back when the church is joined and the time of the dedication of this church, probably a large majority of your friends and neighbors, our friends and neighbors, were going to church somewhere most every Sunday. And we had something back then called a blue law, which meant lots of things were closed on Sunday. So as young people, the church also represented some place that we could go on Sunday and be together with Christian young people and have something to do. The opportunities in Wilmington now for people to do things are much broader than they were. When I drive to church on Sunday morning, I see more cars in driveways than cars backing out of driveways. Some of that changed a little bit more during the COVID period. And I think what we've got to remind ourselves is the value of the church as a family, not just the building, but the value of the church as a family as being a place for everybody to come. And you don't have to sign on the bottom line and say, I'm going to be a member or anything. Would love for people to do that. But it's more about being together than the official aspects of doing it. Even though, in reality, to be the beacon that we need to be, we've got to have some kind of infrastructure, and so people still need to participate in putting the church together. But when you're considering a church, so don't think signing up or showing up means all of a sudden we put to work unless you want to.
Well, that's like Mickey referenced way back early in the discussion about the pastor who was telling her you can sit on the back row or you can jump in. And I think everybody that's represented here jumped in, as well as a whole lot of other people. So does anybody else have anything they want to share about anything related to United? Then if not, thank you all for your input and your sharing and participation. If you're watching the video, thank you for watching it and putting up with us. We hope that it has shed some light for you on who we were, who we are, and who you will help us to be in the future.
And we would be remiss without thanking Greg Wood for his leadership and putting this all together. Remind me so much of your dad. He might be sitting at the table. And yes.
And thank you, Matt.
Yes, Matt, our videographer.
Yes.
Yep. You guys just hang out where you are for a second. I'm just going to go around. You guys can just keep chatting for the next minute or so. I just want to get a little bit of footage of everybody talking. And we'll take a picture too at the end.
Yak, 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 yak.
I mentioned the fact that I was proud to have my friends here.